Hey, it's time for a little Q&A, baby, with the Golden Stallion. And, I have a lot of fun, I have to admit, doing these episodes. Of course, last week was great. Had the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy on, and wow, what a response I am getting from that episode. I am honored. Thank you. It's always my pleasure, of course, to reach out to the Sovereign Tech patrons, the Tortoise Club, if I decide to go with that name. But it means a lot to me. Thank you so much, of course, everybody who is donating through Patreon and listening to these episodes means the world to me. And those who are donating through other means, thank you so much for that. So I have a few... I'm just going to get some errata out of the way here, starting it off. One is that I've had people message me, and I appreciate this, and I'll talk about this in the main Sovereign Tech episode this week, episode 190. But I appreciate that people have. So here's one of the difficulties in why I didn't do a subscriber content in the past was I couldn't really find a very efficient way that allowed for kind of restricted access, to the content itself, for people that would subscribe, and donate and all of that. There really wasn't a very elegant solution. And honestly, in a lot of ways, there still isn't. Patreon's about the best thing going for a lot of reasons, because it's not just the content, the content controller, but it's also, the payment processing, which is great. It's also the host for the content as well, even though I could do that all independently. But it's the most, if there's a list of checkboxes for how to do great subscriber content, Patreon handles 9 out of 10. The 10th one's the hard part. And that is that with the content, how do you get it efficiently to people in a place that they like to use it, and give them total control. And what I mean by total control is how do you get it to people to where they could speed up the audio? That's the hard part. Some like Pocket Cast, which is a great, podcast app, and the one that I largely recommend, unless you're going with a DApps setup, decentralized, anonymous, private, and secure. Unless you're going with that, it's the best one going. That one does allow for password protected access. But even then it's kind of flaky. And I have the fortunes of being able to learn from other podcasts in the space, like the School Sucks podcast and Puke and the Gang as well. And they've had a lot of, touch and go luck with setting all this up. So Patreon's really been the efficient way to do that. Now, one of the things I've said that is coming up, I'm going to give you 2 solutions here as far as how to solve this issue, because I understand I'm putting out a lot of content, and you want to be able to consume it as fast as possible. I want the same thing. I would want the same damn thing. And in fact, the reason I think maybe more people don't do what I'm doing right now is because they know that that's how a lot of people listen to their podcasts. I listen to podcasts at 2x, 1.8 or 2x speed. In fact, I have a podcast question coming up in this episode, if we can get to them all. I've got 5 questions I want to get to, and we'll see if we can do it all. But anyway, that, it's tough to make that work, like I said, when you have effectively a paywall to go through. So one solution is that Patreon may be allowing for, and I don't know exactly how this is going to work, they may be allowing for an RSS feed for audio content, but I'm not sure how they're going to be able to make that work. If they can make it work patron only, then that'll be interesting. But I wonder if they're going to have to put out per patron, a specific RSS feed. And now if they're doing it that way, that's going to be great, because then say someone stops being a patron, they can hit the cutoff switch on that RSS feed. But that's going to be a major technical feat if they can do that. If they can do that, that is a game changer in the world of content creation and in the world of, value-based earning, value for value earning. That's going to be fucking huge if that's how they pull that off. So, but I wouldn't be shocked if they don't, because I'm not exactly sure how they're going to manage that. I mean, everything that they're doing right now, it's amazing that they're managing all that alone, especially on one site, with one server set. So, I'm not sure how exactly, that's going to fly. The other option that exists is that through Patreon, you can there is a download link, especially if you go through the mobile site. There is a download link that you can use. And that once you download the episode, be it on desktop or if you do it through your mobile site, you can use VLC Player, which is available on pretty much every platform on the planet, iOS, Android, FreeBSD, Windows, whatever. The VLC player does have speed controls, and so you could download it and then listen to it through VLC. That's like the best option going, but I don't like that it's not a one-stop shop. I would really much rather have this content available, through Patreon itself, or through some kind of RSS feed, that has some kind of paywall features built into it. But I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work. I really appreciate that people want to listen to this stuff faster. But those are my recommendations. I'll tell you though, if you download the Patreon app on mobile, like, you can listen to it right through the app. You don't have the speed controls, but you can listen to it right through the app. I think it'll open up a browser window, and then it'll stream it. But you could do it, like I said, you really can do it right through the app. The Patreon app is fantastic because it also has the messenger, in which people have been getting in touch with me and sending me all these great questions, and I'm honored and I appreciate that. And I respond every single Patreon message, unless you tell me you don't need to respond. I respond to every single one, at the very least, with the thank you so much for being a donor, thank you for digging the show and everything, and I'll definitely say well, I'll get to this, or whatever I make of it, and I'll even share links. Like, people have asked me, well, where was the Dark Android? Could you tell me more about Dark Android? Where was the special for that? And I'll just I would send somebody the link right through the Patreon Messenger. So that is really the best way going to get in touch with me. Another thing I wanted to bring up before we get into our questions for this week. So, speaking of things Patreon has added on, they now allow for tagging. They're actually changing the format of the web page in general and how everything presents itself. So they've let me in as a beta tester, and I can only I didn't ask to be a beta tester. They just said that I was part of select group to be a beta tester and all that. I'm not sure how many people are in on that, but they did say not every account is going to be able to use it right now. But anyway, I can only thank you, the Sovereign Tech patrons, for this, probably because of the recent really very nice rise in patronage. So we have 34 patrons so far. That's just on Patreon. We have others outside of that. And we're doing well. Again, we're over 1/5 of the goal. My first goal of getting 500 a month for doing Sovereign Tech, to be able to do 2 episodes, 2 main episodes. Again, they wouldn't be Patreon only. 2 main episodes of Sovereign Tech per week. Anyway, so thank you so much for that, because I think that has kind of put me on the map to some degree at Patreon, even though it's small potatoes compared to what some people make on there. But that's totally fine. It's an honor to me. But what they are allowing now for is tagging of posts. And so they are tagging. It's not a site-wide tagging, so it's not like a hashtag system at all. But what it'll allow for is, so these are Q&A episodes, your questions, Brian's answers, right? And I think we're in the 6th episode in this series, which the series will go on forever. But anyway, it'll allow for you to, it has 3 options at the top. There's the page, then there's patron posts, and then maybe because there's a social media element, there's creator posts, and then there's patron posts. Stephanie has already posted something on the page, and it kind of works like Facebook. I'm telling you, you know, here's a little hint. If I was starting a podcast, I would be using Patreon up the fucking wazoo. Okay. I mean, I would be all over it, doing that. I'm happy to be all over it right now, but I mean, it's just impressive what you can make happen with it, because it has the social media aspects of it, has the messaging aspect of it, it has the ability to get donations through it. I mean, it's really something. So anyway, but when you go to patron posts, it gives you an option to filter all of these posts that you as patrons have access to. And you can just hit, like what I can do is now I can tag the question and answer episodes with the tag Q&A. And so then you can see all the Q&A episodes. When I'm doing top 8s, I can tag them with top 8, which there's going to be another top 8 coming out this week, by the way. Or if it's the hentai episodes where we're doing the hentai review, I can tag them with hentai. And then you can just look at all the hentai. I mean, it's really, really slick. In fact, honestly, like a website could barely do it better. How it all works out. So that is a new feature that's out there. You might not be able to take advantage of it right now, but I am already backlogging. I still have to do some work on it, but I am back tagging all of the Patreon only content. And I'll tag, probably the main episodes too. But I mean, it all has to be done manually. I can't do any if this then that with it. So I think that's really exciting. That'll make it easier for you to look at the content. And like I said, right now, the best way, if you want to consume the content at a much faster speed, is to just download it, put VLC on whatever system you're using, and you should be able you'll be able to speed up the speed at which you're listening to it. That's the best thing going. And understand that the Patreon only content, eventually I'm going to do this with the main Sovereign Tech episodes as well. The Patreon only content, like I put full tags, full metadata tags, artwork and everything right into the episode. So you'll be able to see the questions, the show notes, the links, as well as the show artwork. All of that should be there for you to access. So anyway, enough of the, I don't know, is that, what do you call it? I was going to say not the housework, the house cleaning, I don't know, whatever, the shop talk, enough of that. I already did 10 minutes of it, for fuck's sake, and yeah. Anyway, so we've got a few technical questions here, really some classic ones that get asked a lot, that I've covered on Sovereign Tech in the past that could use a good refresh. And so I will cover them here. And then we have a more philosophical question that I want to get into. And then if we have time, there's a fun geeky question that has to do with Star Wars, that we'll get into towards the end. So why don't we start it off right here with let's get into the first one with the tech questions. And this is, both of these are kind of relative. This is, what phone should I buy now? And I got a few questions about this. There's also been a lot of questions about what apps should I use, and all of these I am putting with the apps. I'm putting together that takes more of a list and a little more work to kind of put together and comprise. If there are ever, it's a great question to ask me. If there's ever a specific thing that you want to do and you want to know what's the best app, please, don't hesitate to ask me. I will answer you right away, and I will save it also for a Q&A show. But also let me know. It helps if when you ask these questions, it helps if I know your mindset. And what I mean is, do you want it to be completely open source? Do you want it to be, secure, encrypted, with the best encryption and all that? Because there's a lot of different answers based upon your use case, what you want to use. And I can answer that in a bunch of different ways. I mean, I keep track. Understand, I don't just keep track of the crypto economy. I keep track of tech in general. So I test things out here and there. So I have knowledge of, if you want to use just like what's going to have the broadest user base, what works great to use with, grandma or with my company or something like this, and you're not so worried about encryption or even open source. I can answer all those different questions. So it helps me like at the base level, what you want, or I can give you all the options. I can tell you which one's good, as far as like following dark Android principles or being dApps. Again, dApps is decentralized, anonymity, privacy, and security. That's the concept of dApps. And that word, I gotta admit, that word's kind of been taken up. There's like dApps right now, which is 2 Ps instead of just the 1 P, like dApps. dApps means, distributed applications, I guess. Anyway, whatever. I was using the word dApps first. I know that, but oh well. But yeah, don't hesitate to ask me on that. But anyway, this is just a simple question that people ask in various different ways. But what's the best phone to get your hands on today? And I'll answer this in a few different ways. The first question is, and most people don't include this information. It's helpful if I do have this as well, which is what telco are you using? What mobile provider are you using? Because if you're using Verizon and Sprint, largely that limits your options significantly. You're really stuck with using, the more mainstream phones, which are fine. A lot of them are fine, but maybe there's some inexpensive options or perhaps more thoughtful, more thought out options that could exist if you were using, say, AT&T or Straight Talk or any of those other ones that allow you to bring your own phone. And like T-Mobile, where they just send you a SIM card and you just plug it in and away you go. That is definitely, getting a phone where that's unlocked and is international and allows you to put in your own SIM card from whatever provider. I think that's the best option to always go with. And, it's not like phones have gotten to the point today where it's not like, even just like 2-3 years ago. It's not like 2-3 years ago where if you didn't get a phone through a carrier, the phone would cost you literally, $600, $700, $800, some crazy amount of money. We're to the point now where you can get really, really good phones that can do just about everything, as long as you're not looking to go, crazy with VR or even with gaming, and maybe if you're willing to forego NFC, though even if you want to keep NFC, there's also, great inexpensive options. You can get a great phone for $100, $150, maybe even less. Like Virgin Mobile sells some phones for like $50, to buy into their system. But granted, you're largely locked into their system, and good luck trying to get it unlocked. But as far as unlocked phones that you can just buy outright with no plan and all that, yeah, the blue phones from BLU, the bold like us, I guess that's what BLU means. That's a company out of Miami, Florida. They're fine phones. And they're relatively sturdy. They're usually, aluminum unibody and all this. It's interesting, that you can do that. So you don't have to hash out a ton of money anymore. So the idea of buying unlocked phones and getting on board with T-Mobile or AT&T or whoever. Sprint apparently, so here's the difference is that you have CDMA and you have GSM. Okay. Now Sprint and Verizon were really pushing for this CDMA standard, with the antennas, with the signal that their mobile phones receive. But they're the only ones largely in the world that use CDMA, and with 4G, with LTE, they're kind of getting away from that. And so, to where you might be able to bring on your phone because LTE is just used everywhere. But you can get SIM cards from Sprint, bottom line, but it's still kind of touch and go, especially depending on where you live. If you live somewhere where, you largely get 3G access, and there's still plenty of parts, at least of the United States, and especially, internationally, where that is the case, you're going to have to get a phone through Sprint itself. Yeah, the interesting thing, there's an advantage to getting a phone from Sprint or Verizon potentially, is that if you can access the SIM card within it, and thus replace it, or if you can get them to unlock it, the nice thing is that you do have that CDMA antenna built into it, because every phone that has CDMA has GSM, but every phone that has GSM is not CDMA compatible. Some are, but not all of them are. So those are the kind of the initial challenges with depending on what telco you're using. So largely, I'll just say this right out of the gate. If you are using Sprint and you are using Verizon, the best phones you can get is really just get something from Samsung. Or if Google has the Nexus device of the Nexus device du jour, available, grab the latest Nexus device. I know, like with Sprint, you can get the 6P. I will say, and maybe I should have waited a month to address this question, and maybe I'll probably review it on Sovereign Tech, so I'll kind of answer it then as well. But there's a good bet that you will have, I think they're called Sailfish. Sailfish and Angelfish might be the two, or maybe Angelfish was the watch. But anyway, there are a couple of, I believe, HTC-made smartphones coming out from Google. They are Nexus devices, probably coming out the end of September. So you might want to wait for those. I mean, and getting a Nexus device is a really great idea, no doubt about that, because getting a Nexus device, you're guaranteed all of those Android updates at all time, and you get that vanilla experience to where you can customize it to the way you want it to. I don't really recommend, as far as buying phones, like an Android phone right now overall, I didn't see when the Galaxy Note S7 from Samsung came out, and the Note series is great. It's been great for, since its inception. I didn't see anywhere to where, and I tried to find an answer to this, was what is the Note 7 Daydream ready? And I can't find an answer to that. Now, Daydream is Google's new VR technology that they are going to be, you're probably going to see a lot about towards the end of September, early October. The coming Nexus devices will likely be Daydream ready. But I don't think any of the present Galaxy series is Daydream ready. The only phone out there right now that, as I understand it, that is Daydream ready, that is ready for this new VR protocol, effectively, is the ZTE Axon 7. And so the ZTE Axion 7, that's the phone I'm recommending at the moment. I think, just for that Daydream ability alone, but also this is a phone, again, you'd have to buy an unlocked one, but this is a phone that I think it costs $400, has 4 gig of RAM, 64 gig of onboard storage. It's really got a lot of nice features. Now, some people said it comes with a ton of bloatware on it, as far as like pre-installed apps and everything. That may be true, but considering the fact that if you needed a phone right now, it's very future-proof. In fact, it has Dolby Atmos built into it, which Dolby Atmos is kind of Dolby's latest 3D sound ability, which may be a requirement for the Daydream VR protocol that Google has created, or, standard, I should say. Maybe it's a protocol. That might be a requirement. So the sound that comes out of this phone is fucking insane. So I recommend that as like really overall the best phone available out there right now for $400. If you can get the international version, if you can get the international version, which I think runs, I want to say like around maybe $500, something like that. That has 128 gig of onboard storage, and it also has 6 gig of RAM as compared to 4. That's just amazing. I don't think any Nexus device that's going to come out will offer at least that much RAM. But what a phenomenal little phone. So that's my top runner right now. But like I said, if you are a Sprint or Verizon customer, just get some Nexus device, or get one of the Galaxy series, one of their latest ones, be it the S7, the S7 Edge, or the Note 7. Any of those will do you fine. There is, in the 7 series, there is the S7 Active. This is an AT&T exclusive. This is a great phone. It's a tough phone. It's waterproof, has a larger battery, does not come with a fingerprint reader. Fingerprint readers are, they are a security hole. They're an exploit just waiting to happen. It's almost impossible to get a modern phone without one today. It's just impossible. Really, it's to that point. The S7 Active, you might be able to buy an unlocked one through eBay or something, and then use it outside of AT&T. If you can, great, go for it. Get your hands on that. I think that's a fine phone. It has all the guts of the S7 series overall. And I don't know if it can plug into the Gear VR. That's something else to consider too, is that, if you're worried about having the, one of my criteria for buying a new phone is it Daydream compatible, Daydream VR. Granted, Samsung has their own deal. They have their own, ecosystem going for themselves. They have the Gear VR. And so maybe Daydream doesn't matter to you because the Gear VR, is its own thing. It's Oculus powered, Oculus Rift powered, or effectively, and all that. So maybe that's not as big a deal to you if you like to stick in the Samsung universe. And understand that when you're buying a Galaxy, when you're buying into the Samsung, anything Samsung, you are buying into very much the entire Samsung ecosystem, which in many ways is independent of the rest of Android. So keep that in mind if that's a path you're going. Personally, I would wait. I can't see why, say like with the Galaxy S8, that Samsung wouldn't make it Daydream compatible, but maybe they never will. Maybe that's going to be just a separate thing done for Nexus devices and for like whatever ZTE comes out with, or whatever other company comes out with. Maybe that's how that's going to work out. I can't really say, and I haven't seen any evidence, really to say either way. There is the Asus Zenfone series. The Zenfone 3 is out or coming out. There are some interesting phones in that lineup, and that is definitely, if you're looking at sub $400, maybe even sub $300 phones, that is a great option to look at. You are not going to get, they're not Daydream ready, but if you just need that sub $300 phone right now, it is a great series. I was a huge fan of the Zenfone 2 series. Unfortunately, they did get rid of the Intel chipset, but that's because Intel has largely, gone away from their mobile chipsets. Not entirely, but in many ways they have, and they're even, we talked about in episode 188 of Sovereign Tech just this past week, that they are now doing a licensing deal with ARM, which is mind-fucking-boggling to me. But hey, whatever, they're doing it. So anyway, the Asus, the Zenfone 3 series, any phone in that series is really solid. In fact, they have, I think it's the Zenfone 3, did they call it the Max or the Mega? But this thing's literally a 7-inch phone. It's huge. Not as powerful as the flat Zenfone 3, but there might be an appeal to having that size phone. I think it's appealing. And they only cost like a couple hundred, the $250, $250 range. So that's an interesting series to look into as well. But that really wraps it up. I mean, as far as the phone to own today, like anything in the Zenfone series, I think is good, but understand that you're not going to be able to take advantage of Daydream, but that's really the only flaw I see with them. Also, the Zenfone 3 series did add a fingerprint reader, as to where you could get in on the Zenfone 2 series, which is still great. In fact, if you just get the raw Zenfone 2 or the Zenfone Zoom, which has that giant fucking camera on the back of it with optical zoom and all that, I mean, those are great because they don't have a fingerprint reader on them, and they still have like 4 gig of RAM. I mean, that's phenomenal. And as far as I know, most apps are still working to be backwards compatible with the Intel chipset, as to where, with ARM, everything works with ARM. But even though the Intel chipset is kind of phasing out, people are still building the apps for it. Like Pokemon Go can be played on the Intel chipset, which finally looks like there's some decline numbers. Speaking of Pokemon Go, there's there is decline now in the usage of Pokemon Go, which, I mean, I'll give it credit. It went a good strong 2 months, full bore. I mean, kudos, to that game for having that kind of, I figured it would have been 2 weeks, but they went 2 months. And if it's your game, it's your game. Rock and roll. Anyway, so we have the ZTE Axiom 7, and then there is, any of the Galaxy, any of the S7 series, of the Galaxies from Samsung. That I think those are fine options. There really isn't, there just isn't that great option out there right now for, that doesn't have the fingerprint reader, or that also includes, removable battery and micro SD cards. A lot of those options, which when I started the Dark Android project, those were like Okay, no fingerprint reader, has to have a micro SD card reader, and should have a removable battery. Like, those were kind of the three things I said, look, if you're going to go with the phone, first off, I recommend a tablet, but if you're going to go with the phone, this is, these are the criteria you want to meet. It's near impossible to meet that criteria. There's the LG, the G series, what are they up to, the G5, which still has some of that, but those phones have been kind of lackluster as late. So I'm not really, I'm not going to recommend those. But that ZTE, I would be thinking about that. And if you're concerned, I know a lot of people say like, well, ZTE and highway, didn't Joe Biden say, a couple of years, 2, 3, however many years ago, that don't buy from these companies because they're working with the Chinese government and the Chinese military and all this stuff. Well, if you're concerned about that, I get it, but guess what? Every other phone you're going to buy is working with the American government, and every government's tyrannical. None are any better than the other in many ways. So, I don't see that as a concern. I mean, if you're buying a smartphone, you're worried the government's going to look at it. Every fucking government's looking at it. Are you kidding me? So anyway, so that's it with the phones. Let's get into another question. Oh, like I said, and also of course Asus's Zenfone series has been really solid. I could recommend those as well. So ZTE, Asus, and the Galaxy series. Let's get into the next one here. Yeah. So what computer? Here's the next question. What computer should I buy today? And actually, this question was more popular than the phone one that a lot of people were asking. So, my recommendation still for, again, this falls under all the same rules as the phones, or even as the apps, like I was mentioning earlier, like the software I was mentioning earlier. Do you want it to be secure? Do you want it to be, like what level of privacy do you want from it? How do you want it all to be open source and everything? So think Penguin. Let's start at that level, that you want like a really secure, what you've got, what's going on, everything's open source computer. Now, I would assume that if you want that kind of computer, you're not going to run Windows or Mac OS. I would assume. You're going to run, I don't know, Triskel, some version of Linux. You're going to run, BSD, FreeBSD, or OpenBSD or something. Now, if you think Penguin, as I was just saying, is right now they are trying to build a computer that, or they're doing like a Kickstarter or whatever. And I know the guys that think Penguin. I think they're solid people. They've been around for a few years. They're making great routers. I've mentioned them previously on Sovereign Tech for years. So they're working on building a laptop that's open hardware and that you know what the BIOS is doing or the UEFI, whatever. And so, you could wait for their computer to come out. I don't have a whole ton of details on that at this moment, but I am planning on changing that fact. I will have a lot of information about it. There is also Librem, Librem. Librem is it Librem? Yeah, because that's the name of the laptops. Purism is the company. But Purism has a laptop series, a couple of them that they've been working on. Some people that I know that own Purism's laptops have been disappointed in the direction that the company is going. Again, Purism's goal was to have this open hardware again, where you can be more confident that, your computer usage is secure and private at the base level. Even Edward Snowden said it was an exciting idea. And I thought it was an exciting idea. It was a very successful Kickstarter, and people have actually gotten their computers. It's one of those Kickstarters that actually was largely successful. Some people I know that, in fact, it was great because they came with Cubes OS, which is this version of Linux that's very secure because it sandboxes every process. It's really, every piece, every app, and all the software and everything. Which is really cool. So I've heard concerns over Librem, or over Purism and their products overall, and I think these are valid concerns, that they already are shifting the goalpost, not the goalpost, but they're shifting kind of goals to where now they're trying to build a tablet, which, at the end of the day, I like the fact, bear with me here. I like the fact that there are, the idea of tablets being made, really like, I mean, that's what Dark Android's all about, is buying a tablet. Usually I recommend the 2013 Nexus 7. I still recommend that over any other tablet. But that, they want to make a tablet computer, that runs Linux. It's all open hardware and all this stuff. And then, so people have concerns over that because the Librem laptops have largely just fucking come out. And so to already be moving away from support, and also this was the other concern, is that the message boards at Purism's site, the support, the customer support has been atrocious. And people are having problems, but, Purism is just like, okay, yeah, we did the laptops. Now let's make a tablet, let's make a tablet PC. Fuck this. And some people have gotten their attention. In fact, even the amazing Pixel, of course, Paige Peterson, who's been a guest on the show and will be a guest again in the near future. She got kind of in their face over the situation, saying, your customer support's terrible, and you're already moving on to the next thing. Why aren't you just, supporting the shit out of your platform that you've already built, with your laptops and everything? It's, let's have this, or let's make better laptops. Like why move away even from the entire form factor? I'm paraphrasing. That might not have exactly been her intent, but that's sort of the gist I got out of it, and that other people have said as well. And, I kind of agree with that, because the way they responded to her is like, well, but, if we can sell more units, if we can sell, this tablet PC, then we can get to our ultimate goal, which is making, a phone and, a smartphone. And it's just like, yeah, I get the idea of wanting to have, this really private smartphone and all this stuff. But that is not a direction that I need Purism to go in. That I don't think anybody needs Purism to go in that direction, because, like we were talking about with the phones earlier. I mean, I talked about on Sovereign Tech a little while back, or a few episodes back, where Black Phone, Silent Circle, and their Black Phone, which is supposed to be this really secure phone, I mean, they're tanking as a business. Because, I mean, they're not only tanking as a business, but also, I actually disagree with when they came out with the Black Phone 2 as compared to the Black Phone 1. The Black Phone 1 did not have the Google Play Store. There you go. You have a lot more confidence that your phone is secure when you do that. Okay, private and secure. But when the Black Phone 2 came out, it's like, well, yep, we're allowing for the Google Play Store, and, we're putting in, you can install Facebook Messenger on it. All of your security goes out the fucking door the instant you put Facebook Messenger on a phone. It's gone. It's done. And so I don't think the world is really ready for anybody, certainly not Purism, to release a phone that is genuinely secure and on board with things. Now, I mean, there are companies making great operating systems. There's Copperhead OS, which we've talked about. I've done full write-ups about Copperhead for, a few times on the Dark Android blog. The people in the space have an understanding for the need for this sort of thing. Okay, but Purism is, if Silent Circle couldn't make the money doing it, Purism isn't going to be the fucking company, to really make the money doing it. So I don't believe in that model. I think there is, due to the success of the Kickstarter and hopefully the future success of the Kickstarter for Think Penguin, I think there is a desire for laptops that have open source hardware and that people can, secure and lock down. I think it's there for smartphones. Okay, but first, yeah, it's there, but it's not there enough to where I think some kind of upstart, needs to be necessarily, like making that hardware so much. I mean, in so many ways, the smartphone itself, the smartphone by its very nature, okay, not talking about the tablet. I think the tablet's an all right idea, but I agree that if they're not doing customer support for the products they've already put out there, they need to fucking stop what they're doing, okay, and don't go into other form factors, and don't go making other stuff, and don't go refreshing your platform every year or whatever. You're a Kickstarter. You're not a fucking company. Man, Think Penguin was a company before it was a Kickstarter. Purism, as far as I understand, was a Kickstarter. It was not a company first. And I mean, as in like they had successful product launches or success, there's varying value subjective. What you define as success, is to varying degrees, I don't think Think Penguin was planning on, selling to billions of people. All right. Anyway, I'm kind of all over the place with this. My point being is that it is a failure in my opinion, for purism to be moving on to other form factors right now. That's the bottom line. Okay. Nobody's going to buy, at the level that is really needed. Nobody's going to be buying, a purism smartphone, in my opinion. Will people do a successful Kickstarter to fund the creation of a laptop that they want? Abso-fucking-lutely they will. But, and the other concern is that, well, okay, say it's a smartphone, how great a support is that smartphone going to get, especially if their laptops don't get very good customer support? Shitty. So I can't, I don't really want to recommend them. I just don't. And Black Phone, again, if that's the idea, if the idea is, if purism's thought is that we're going to release a smartphone down the line where, but their idea is that they're still going to put the Google Play Store on it, kiss my ass. Go buy a ZTE, go buy a Samsung, go buy an Asus, because it's all bullshit if that's the idea. The whole notion's bullshit. So I question a lot of purism's business practices. It's an exciting idea. I think the hardware that they've released, not to say that it's bad. I love the idea that there's hardware switches and all this. But, oh boy. Anyway, I think Think Penguin will do a much better job, of that sort of thing. I hope. I'll put a link in the show notes to Think Penguin. I will do that, just so you can check that out if you want. So that's a computer you might want to wait for. If you cannot wait, if you want that secure and private computer, of course, a link that has been in the show notes for years on Sovereign Tech in every single episode is for LibreBoot. There's two models. There's the LibreBoot X200 and there's the LibreBoot T400, which the last, second part of the name hints at what these really are. These are older ThinkPads, like 2009, 2010. The X200 ThinkPad and the T400 ThinkPad, two legendary computers, dual core. They don't have the latest and greatest video cards in them. That's one of the major flaws. But you can get 8 gig of RAM in them. You can put in, solid state drives or big 1 terabyte drives if you want to do that, hybrid drives even. And all of it, because it's LibreBoot, everything, all of the hardware, all the firmware has been opened up. Okay, so if you're looking for that, I want one of these babies. I really do. I haven't been able to afford one, but I want one of these things because they are fucking sweet. They are so good. So those are, as far as like the computer I can recommend without reservations, anything from LibreBoot. They have the X200 and they have the T400. The X200 is a little 12-inch, but keep in mind the 12-inch doesn't have a trackpad. Something to consider. It has the little, the keyboard nipple. Woo! But the T400 version has the trackpad and all that various stuff. And you can put in second hard drives. It's pretty amazing what they offer there. Of course, they're refurbs, but their customer support, I can tell you, is actually great because I know of other people that have messed their hardware that I trust. So, that's the option to look at there. Now, outside of the idea of 100% privacy and security and all that with the machine, if there's great Linux options if you're wanting a Linux desktop or laptop. There's there's System 76. It's like system76.com. There is with the numbers 76. There's Za-Reason. Za-Reason, that's zareason.com. They're another one that they put out pretty good stuff. System 76 definitely has like the fancier laptops, and some of them have like the Iris Pro chipsets from Intel to where they can play games, but you don't need the power hunger of a dedicated video card inside of them. Those are very nice options. I think, but overall, as far as like the average computer that you can buy, I think the best computer going right now is the HP Spectre. It's the newest model. It has like this bronze and black look to it. It's a 13-inch computer. Very, very nice. Very thin. Lots of power. It could rock some games if it needed to. And I think it runs the high-end model with the Core i7 and like 16 gig of RAM. I think that runs at about 1600. I would die for one of these. I mean, just a gorgeous, gorgeous machine. And the battery life's pretty good. I think that's the best overall computer out there right now. And I think it's a better computer than anything that Mac offers at the moment. And Mac hasn't refreshed their hardware in a while, largely, for their hardware lineup. Unless you're counting like the iMac. So that's that's the direction I would look as far as computer overall. That's really good. If you're looking for the say the sub $300 range, I use the Acer Aspire 1 Cloudbook 14. I use the 14. There's also the 11-inch model, but the 11-inch model I think has already been discontinued. I use the 14-inch. It has 64 gig of onboard, hard drive. It's a flash drive. You cannot replace it. You can't replace anything on this. But again, the computer costs less than $200, and it has 2 gig of RAM, which really sucks. But if you put like Xubuntu on there or Triskel or something like that, it does a very good job being a computer. Running Windows 10, it runs it. But you might be waiting a little bit. No matter what web browser you use, it's you've got some wait time on you. But I mean, it does run Windows 10 overall. I do a lot of my work on it, so that's something to consider if you're looking for that really inexpensive computer. Of course, there's the Raspberry Pi 3, but that's not a laptop. That's a very nice little machine, though, for $35. Again, you spend a little bit more than that for that sort of thing. So those are the computers overall that I recommend. And I'm a little like, if you're looking to spend $600, I think that there's this weird area. I think there's a strange gray area where you get into the computers that are, say, $400 to $1,000. Where when you're buying in that range, I think you're buying a very suspect computer. Like, if you're willing to spend just a little bit more, your options really open up, especially if you go over 1,000. Then you could buy, the MSI. Like if you wanted a gaming laptop, you can get into the MSI gaming laptops, which I think are some of the best gaming laptops on the planet, if not the best, not counting like companies like Origin and some of these other ones. So yeah, I am really skeptical of buying computers in that range. I always say just go that one extra level, and you could get into buying some very nice machines like Alienware from Dell. Of course, you could buy those with Bitcoin. You can buy a lot of these with Bitcoin, through Newegg or even Amazon if you do the gift card route. But those are the best computers out there running. That's the best answer I could give you, right now as far as that goes. I mean, when you're building desktops, if you're building desktops, you know the deal. You don't need to listen to me as far as what's the best thing going. NVIDIA still has the best cards, as much as I love AMD. You know that score. So anyway, if you really are interested in like desktop stuff that I recommend, you can ask me about that. I do recommend, maybe I should mention this, if you are really just looking for like a little desktop, the 500, I've had this in the wish list for Sovereign Tech for some time, but there is the Skull Canyon NUC, NUC. I've often called it Nuke, just to be funny, but most people are pronouncing it NUC. And the Intel NUC line is very, very interesting, and they are decently powerful desktop computers, and they're only like they're not even 8 inches long. I mean, they are really small computers. But the Skull Canyon model has a really great Iris Pro chipset from Intel, and so it can play a lot of games, just about any game out there. It may not give you the best refresh rate, frames, FPS and refresh rate and all that, but it does a hell of a job, and they cost under $600 now. Like I saw the Skull Canyon NUC running for like $580. It's still in my wish list, by the way, wishlist.zog.ninja, if you want to find that. But The only thing is you have to buy the RAM and the hard drive for it separately. So you're looking at, at least a $700 computer. But very, very nice, mini computer if you wanted to strap it onto the back of a monitor or something. Super powerful. And it doesn't come with an operating system initially, obviously, because it doesn't come with a hard drive. So if you wanted to put Windows 10 on it, well, you might have to pay for Windows 10, or, if you want to, just put Linux on there. Intel's hardware is, largely open in what they do. Not all the way, but much of it is open and works very well with Linux and other systems. So that's really something to consider as far as a desktop option goes. But like I say, if you want to talk about building desktops, you can send me a message. We could talk about that. I'm already spending way more time on this than I expected. We're at the 50-minute mark, and I haven't even gotten into the philosophical question. Let's see. I had a question about what podcasts are you listening to these days? I can get through this one quickly. I have really slimmed down the amount of podcasts that I listen to, especially because now I'm producing so much more content in general, and I have so many other projects that I'm working on. Hyperchronius 2 is still coming. And I've had to take on some other jobs and everything. But as far as podcasts I'm listening to, also, I just want to say, I've also my mindset's kind of changed on this. I've recently gotten into listening to a lot more audiobooks, and using that, using the ear time that I have to plug those in, because podcasts, so many of them, even Sovereign Tech in some ways, as much as I try to keep it really evergreen and talk about the big subjects, so many of them are just current events. And, I challenge you to even remember, like from a month ago, what a lot of podcasts were even talking about. As to where I think when you listen to a book, there's a whole case being made, and there's a lot that you can, really integrate with the book. It becomes this whole picture that is kind of timeless. If you're listening / reading to the right book. If you're listening to some bullshit book about Donald Trump, then whatever. That's going to become meaningless in no time. So I've been wanting to, with my ear time, listening time, I've been wanting to make it stuff that really stands the test of time, and that gives me something to integrate going forward. Not so much something that's just commentary and response to to current events. I want it to have some real deep meaning. There's nothing wrong if shows are that way. It's just I'm limiting the amount of shows that are that way. I listen to This Week in Tech every week. I listen to Security Now abso-fucking-lutely every week. That is my number one podcast. I listen to the Eddie Trunk Show every week. I listen to Collider's Jedi Council. That's a Star Wars podcast. I do listen to that every week. But boy, and I listen to School Sucks pretty much every week. I listen to School Sucks podcast. But other than that, like literally those are the podcasts I listen to. There might be some that get interjected here and there, but that is the main gist of what I take in. And sometimes I listen to the Windows Central podcast, but that's because I like Daniel Rubino, and he's an anarchist, East Coast anarchist and left libertarian, all that. So I appreciate him a lot. So I do listen to his work here and there. But yeah, that's really it. I've really pared it down, and the rest of the time I am listening to whatever audiobook is tickling my fancy at the time. So there, I answered. We got that one out of the way. Let's see. All right, so here's kind of the big question, and then maybe I can spend some time on the Star Wars question, but I don't want this to be too much longer. So I'll read the question here from the messenger. I have a question that is probably very elementary, and you have covered this sort of thing, and you may have covered this sort of thing before. If you feel like discussing it on a future Q&A, I would like to hear your thoughts. I just heard that in the town next to mine, a woman in her 80s and a man in his 60s were murdered in their home and their car stolen. As of a day later, the killer is on the run. My question is on how people like that would be caught, or should they be caught, in a world without police. Say a family member walked in to find them dead. What should they do? I agree with probably most, if not all, of what you say about police. So I'm not one of those, quote, well, you talk bad about police, but wait until you need them, end quote, kind of people. It's just sometimes I hear about something and I wonder how it could be dealt with in a world without police and giving these people authority they don't really have nor deserve over others. I believe I remember you talking about privatized police and how that is no better, and I agree. I don't think privatizing something automatically makes it better or moral. That is all. Thanks, Brian. So appreciate the question. Yeah, I have talked about it a few times on Sovereign Tech, at least, well, maybe 3 times. But anyway, I usually don't like get all cohesive or, go into it in terrible depth. Usually it's related to the use of cameras and, and all this that I bring that up. Yeah, I mean, there's the old cop block saying, right? Badges don't grant you extra rights. Nobody, I mean, there's a few different parts to this question, or, there's a few different questions in here. So I'll try to address all of them. I mean, as far as the validity of police, I mean, nobody has the right to be a policeman. A lot of the, what people consider rights or human liberties, as I more particularly like to call them, because how do you scientifically prove rights? They're like what gets listed off as rights, But with human liberties, I mean, nobody has the human liberty to be a policeman. I think the idea is as much a fiction as government. Now, some people will say that you can voluntarily choose to have a kind of you can voluntarily vote for, perhaps, if again, this is all under the auspices of a free society, no more governments and all this, right? World without police. I suppose you could voluntarily choose to have some kind of protection racket, but I think, in my opinion, that turns into an incredibly slippery slope. Once you create any kind of enforcement body, I think, you are less than a hop, skip, and a jump away from a government. You may have what ends up being really a government. This was always the thing, this argument of the need for a protection racket of this need for safety is really what unfortunately kept otherwise largely brilliant people like, say, Ayn Rand, or even Nathaniel Branden and others like that, from going all the way, or maybe even Mises, Ludwig von Mises, from realizing, yeah, we don't need governments. It kept them from being anarchists, because I think they felt like there needed to be this enforcement body that protected, yourself, your property, and all of this. And I understand that, safety is in many ways a human need. Okay. Just as much as justice, which is what we're going to talk about here, I think is also a basic human need. I think a lot of people, feel needs for this sort of thing. But safety in and of itself, I mean, that's just, what's the old Picard line, from Star Trek? Something like, safety, the age-old cry of the oppressor, right? And that's the thing. There is no guarantee of safety in life. There's none. And the only methods you can use of enabling degrees of safety are ones that you choose, or that you build relationships around. Not that you vote, not that everybody gets together and says, okay, these people are our protectors or something like this, or they are the people that are, we will hand over perhaps our privacy and some other human liberties to be able to protect our property or to protect our lives or to be able to enact justice on others. I mean, in my opinion, in a free society, there is no room for that. For that kind of institution. But see, this is where the answer kind of becomes a cheat. Okay? Because if you had a free society, there would be a lot of different understandings of the way things work. Okay? One way that people think about, with a free society, say you have contracts or even your life, say you lose your life and all of this, there would be, there'd be so many varying, and obviously I'm one person, I can't possibly think of how all this stuff will work. I could tell you, I'll give you my answer in a second here, but a lot of people talk about the idea is that, well, there'd be various insurance companies, and what would happen is that you would, if somebody died, again, you're in a free society, so it's a good bet that you probably have a lot more money than you do now, or at least you'd have a lot more resources, whatever that ends up looking like, and that when somebody was murdered, you would automatically get a payout. It's like life insurance, right? So there would be some restoration. And this is really key. If you've never looked into restorative justice, I really recommend you do that. It's a simple concept. The idea is that you don't just lock away somebody. You don't just kill somebody for doing some kind of criminal act, some kind of injustice. You have them restore as much as is humanly possible the victims or the victim's family, or which are still victims because they have suffered a loss, say of a son, a daughter, a mother, whatever. So, restorative justice, that's a key concept to have in here. That's not what we have punitive justice. We have a punishment-based justice system. And that just stands against really what actual justice is, and in my opinion, what it would look like in a free society. But I think I'm getting way off track here. Anyway, so there would be a life insurance payout, and perhaps this insurance company would have investigators. Nothing wrong with the idea of investigators. I think that's a fine idea. The idea of the private dick, right? The private investigator, Sherlock Holmes, going around and all this. I think those are fantastic things to exist. I might feel different about the insurance companies, but I'm not going to go into that. But you would have an investigator. That investigator could find out to a degree who enacted the murder, in the case of this murder, we'll say. And then that person, if everybody was paying into sort of this insurance policy, that person would get deducted, in a certain amount of, whatever amount of money they had to get paid out to the families, and all this. So it would be injurious of them. Maybe there'd be some other form of restoration that could occur, to the victimizer, to the quote unquote criminal. But as far as how that would work, I don't know. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that entire system in the first place. Okay. I have major issues with the idea of insurance. I mean, this is how some people say that this is how you can ethically do contracts, is that you have to, if you did an agreement with somebody, because I bring up contracts all the time, I think they're largely bullshit. Like bills of sale are fine. There's certain, what some people would define as contracts, some of them are okay, but a lot of the ones that people talk about I think are just insane and are absolutely against freedom because they do require an enforcement body. But what a lot of people say is that you create an escrow, and this is kind of what the insurance company would be, is that there's like this escrow where when you agree to something, a certain amount of money is put up, and the instant that, and that money is held in escrow, it's held in escrow. That way, it's not like if somebody, breaks the contract that, oh, well, shit, I can't pay it. Sorry. No, it's an escrow. It's always held there. And so, kind of the idea, or it's always accessible, I should say. So the idea is that, you'd have contracts where if somebody did break the contract, there doesn't need to be an enforcement body, just the agreed amount within escrow would then transfer over to the person who didn't break the contract, to the other party of the contract, right? So some people talk about that sort of thing, and you could I could see where this sort of thing could get applied to the justice system in general. But largely, I still feel like there's going to be some kind of, enforcement body around all of that. And you are going to, in pretty short order, have a government on your hands. And you're going to have popularity contests, and you're going to have people, arguing over who gets to be the CEO of such things. And I mean, it's going to get nuts very, very quickly, in my opinion, if you went down that way. That is one way that people talk about how you live in a world without police. Is just that there's this constant, there's just like this giant escrow in the sky that constantly takes from you if you do something wrong, I mean, murder's a serious thing, understand that. But then here's a flip side, and then I'll get into my answer. Here's a flip side to all of that. The flip side, to some degree, is that murder really doesn't happen that often. And also, this is kind of the cheat answer, okay? First off, murder doesn't happen that often. When murders do happen, they are often a one-off. They are usually what's called a crime of passion. This is statistically provable if you want to believe the statistics. Okay, and you can look into the works of like Steven Pinker, not that he's 100% right on everything, but there's some validity, I think, to what he says overall. But a lot of things that definitely have a victim are exceptionally rare to occur. The other aspect of that is that in a free society where perhaps there aren't so many people, may not feel such a need to victimize others to get ahead in life, because a free market would be a little more, a little bit more of a meritocracy, and just the hard work would pay off and you could do the hard work. I mean, because stealing, and even in our digital age, stealing and murder and all these different things, a lot of them, honestly, are harder work. I mean, pickpocket's one thing, but, we're getting to the point to where, a pickpocket is almost, what are they going to do? I mean, nobody's carrying cash around. Credit card fraud is even going away, with a lot of the new systems that we have and all this. So a lot of those kind of crimes, those that type of theft is even becoming, it's untenable. It's becoming near impossible. So anyway, in a free society, or a lot of these crimes, this is the point I want to bring up. Okay, my point is that a lot of theft and murder, a lot of quote unquote criminal activity is harder to do than honest work. So why do it? If the honest work didn't have so much barriers to entry, I think you'd see a lot of crime go away. I mean, this saying goes, can work so much across the board that, business over bullets every day. You replace bullets with business, and if you get rid of the barriers to entry to business, people will stop using bullets. And I think that's true. I think absolutely that would happen. So there would be, my overall point being is that in a free society, there would, for it to even become a free society, I think there would be a massive mindset change. And there would be so little crime because very few things are crime. Very few things actually have a victim. And the way a lot of technology is going, or the potential, the ability to set things up in such a way, I think a lot of theft would become very difficult. Difficult to the point that it's not worth doing. So, I mean, and there's other, I can get into other aspects of that. I think that property in the future is going to be largely virtual. I mean, smartphones are so commodified. Why steal a smartphone anymore? There's, people steal iPhones because they still hold some kind of larger value. But I mean, that's changing. We're, especially with smartphones, we're getting to the point of near zero marginal cost on the production of these things. I mean, it's going to get to the point where a smartphone costs $5, it gets to, why even steal it? So now you can say that there's just some sick people out there and they do this stuff just because they want to. Well, when you get to a free society, that kind of person, here's the problem, is that governments in and of themselves, the idea of police forces and armies in and of themselves, they themselves are not, they perpetuate those attitudes. I love the saying that power attracts the corruptible. Not that absolute power corrupts, absolutely, but like Frank Herbert put it better, the author of Dune. He said, power attracts the corruptible. And that's the thing, is that a lot of this murder and theft is near incentivized by the fact that there are police, by the fact that there are governments and all this. So if you got rid of them, a lot of these attitudes, a lot of these avenues that people think are somehow viable or something worth doing and all that really kind of fall away, I think. Now, I mean, granted, we said last week when I had Stephanie on, we were talking about how the liberty movement really attracts a lot of fraudsters. It attracts a lot of sociopaths because it's a movement of people that don't believe in calling the police. Well, yes, it does, but it attracts them because they know that within the status paradigm that we live in, there's not much outside of the police that people can do. But if you lived in a world where there were no police, and that, private systems of whatever restorative justice systems would exist and could flourish and become viable, then, the sociopaths aren't attracted to that, because then there's an alternative option for justice. But most people don't even think about this, and it's generally outside of like mediation and things like this. I mean, look, when somebody dies, say in the liberty movement, or if there was a murder in the liberty movement, not that I know of one, but if there was, I guarantee people are calling the cops, because it's what's there. Okay, but if there was another system there, someone else that they would call, again, if it's that idea of an insurance company that people wanted, whatever, then that's what they would do. But understand that, the way that the justice system is set up today, I think ironically, it incentivizes to some degree, a lot of criminality. And it institutionalizes it, in fact, because you want to be a thief, become a politician. If you want to kill people, become a cop. It's funny. It's so funny because people are, they're always saying, well, what would we do without, and I know this emailer wasn't saying that, but I'm saying a lot of your everyday people are like, well, we got to be protected from the criminals. We got to be protected from the murderers. We got to be protected from the thieves. Folks, the people who you think are protecting you are those people. The people in government are the thieves. They are the crooks. They are the criminals. They are the murderers. How ironic. So, again, it's a bit of a cheat to say that, well, people would, if we were in a free society, people would be different. They wouldn't have an institution to run to allow them to do their thing, and those are the real ones out there. And in fact, but also at the same vein, I don't think most people want to engage in any of that. I really don't. I think that crime is strangely, like, crime is in many ways a byproduct of the very sick system we live in. And if that sick system didn't exist anymore, a lot of it would go away. But also, especially with murder, most people don't kill. And even the ones that do, like I said, it's usually a crime of passion. It would always be an absolute one-off. And I'm not saying there doesn't need to be some justice involved there. Okay? But it should be restorative. It should not be, let's off the guy, let's put him away for decades, whatever. There needs to be restoration. That is not restoration by any definition. So now, as far as my answer, to a lot of this, well, admittedly, I think that people are dumb. People are just stupid. I've talked about this a few times recently on Sovereign Tech, and it's like a fact that I just was holding on to, saying, no, this isn't true. People really are smart. But no, people are stupid. So I don't think that they are effectively, despite what their instincts will tell them to not kill and all that, I still believe that. But overall, they're not going to think about it deep enough to where they come to these realizations that we're talking about. Just the very simple fact that I brought up, that, look, all those people that you're afraid of, that you want safety from, they are the ones in government. They are the ones in blue. They'll never realize that. So I don't have any hope that there's going to be a free society, ever. Not one of any kind of scale. That's the key point for me, is that I think that the real way to get, or the only way there's going to be free societies, is when they are on an incredibly small level, very local levels, and that fall within like the Dunbar number. And you can think my answer is a cheat too, and that's fine if you think that way. But again, I don't accept. It's not that I don't accept. I don't believe that we're ever going to live, somewhere where there is like a genuine anarchist society of any like mass size. I just don't think that's going to happen. I don't think you having babies is going to change anything as far as that goes, because the statists are going to, are outbreeding you 1,000,000 to 1. And that might be literal. So, when you base your societies and your communities on much smaller numbers, I think that when you do end up with, situations like murder and whichever else, first off, it'd be very difficult because you're living in such small numbers. But second off, if it does happen, there's nothing wrong with investigating and looking into it. Okay. I think that those are fine things. And then, maybe trying to get some kind of restoration, out of that. But part of how I think, anarchist societies or how the kind of societies I want to live in would work is that they're sort of off the map, in some ways. I mean, yeah, anybody can die from an accident. You could be driving a car and people could die from a car accident, and that's not murder. But I think murder becomes, when you kind of remove yourself from a lot of this, a lot of these situations, and when your societies are, when your community is really intentional. I think murder becomes it's passé, and it gets to another point for me. I'm spending way too much time on this, but I think it's an important subject. It gets to another point for me to where I don't think anything will really change on any large level until the idea that taking a human life is just total anathema becomes mainstream, and it's not mainstream. This goes back to people being stupid. Nobody's willing to think that deep about it. No one, there's, I was going to say, not that I want anybody to ever experience this. I don't. But if people knew what it felt like after you take a life, no one would do it. That's why I think a lot of these cases where, there is a murder, often it's a one-off because the person realizes they come to terms with what they just did, and they realize that it is so antithetical to their existence. It's so antithetical to the human condition that, most people vomit after they kill. It doesn't matter what the killing was about, if it was something they felt justified in, or if they considered it defense, or if it was a crime of passion, or whatever. Most people puke. I puked. When I was in the military. I hope you understand. I assume people listening to this know that I was in the military. So, I do know what it feels like. I am speaking from an unfortunate amount of experience. But, if people had any clue, they wouldn't do it. And I know you're going to say there's some sociopaths, but folks, really, how many of those kind of people are there out there? How many? And especially if we lived in a world where the institutionalized victimization didn't exist, i.e. governments, police, armies, how many of them, would there really be? I just don't think there's that many. So much of this stuff goes on today because of the traumas and because of the institutionalization of a lot of this stuff. Man. So if you feel that answer is kind of dodging, I understand why you feel that way. I laid out what I think people expect on a large scale, like on a country size or state size, amount of people, where you're talking about people's in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or even millions. How do you enact this? What do you do about a murder and all that? I think I covered what people think that way. But I don't think that organizing in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or millions, I think that's where you run into trouble. I don't agree with that concept in and of itself. So that's not how I'd solve it. But anyway, because I think like a lot of insurance companies, all the stuff, it very much becomes scams. And when the thing is that when people lose sight, when things get to that scale, when it gets that size to where you have insurance companies, watching over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people, when it gets to that point, like you can't really keep an eye on what that business is doing. And then I think then you create institutions where it's like, oh, well, you end up with embezzlement and fraud and all these different things. I think scale becomes the issue with so many things. It really, really, really does. So that's my answer on that. I'll just lay out one other alternative some people have talked about, and I guess you could be voluntary about this. But in fact, somebody, I can't think of his name, but he wrote a little bit of a book on the idea. He's big on Ethereum, and I talked about it briefly on Sovereign Tech maybe a couple of years ago. I can't think of the name of the book, but if I can think of it, I'll put it in the show notes, but I probably won't be able to think of it. But the idea is kind of like David Brin's covalence, and the idea is that you would have a hyper-open society, a radically transparent society, where there's just cameras fucking everywhere. And not that there is necessarily like any, not that there's some governing body or anything, but just that there is this all-seeing eye at all times. And so you have no question over who committed the murder or whatever. And then restoration, could be enacted and all this. Some people want that radically transparent society. I could see where people could choose that. I don't want any part of a society like that for a lot of reasons, but that's another option I think that people might consider wanting to go down. That's how you would find out. But my last, I really will make this my last statement, is that life is not safe. And guaranteeing safety is tantamount to tyranny. Each individual, be the best person that you can be in every way, and have that confidence, work on yourself, have that confidence. There's some things in evolution. This is another thing too. Again, this goes down to, I guess, not changing the human condition, but, fully realizing it perhaps. I do believe that there is a certain way that people can carry themselves to where even the most ardent murderer stands off. I think there's a lot of kind of, you got to be careful when you bring up evolutionary science and evolutionary, psychology and all this stuff. But I firmly believe that there's a way people can carry themselves to where you are walking around with the confidence that, of don't fuck with me, and not that you're going to kill somebody. You can learn non-lethal versions of self-defense, but that you are confident in who you are. You are not somebody to be trifled with. Now, I know when a person's 80 and 60, we're talking very, very different situations there. But yeah, I really, if people took their safety and their responsibility on themselves and didn't offload it onto others, and then create tyrannical organizations like police, governments, etc., I think you'd have a radically different world just from that. So, yeah. Anyway, I hope that answered it. If people, folks, like I always say, if you think I'm wrong, you email me, you ask me the questions, okay? And I could end up being wrong. I've been wrong before on things, and you just, let me know, and I will discuss it, okay? And I will go over it. And if I think you're right, I will say so. So, don't go quitting on me. Try to have the conversation, because we can have the conversation. Anyway, okay, wow, hour and 20 minutes in. Let's all right, I'm going to touch on this last question really fast because I want it to be kind of a fun one. And pretty much the person was just asking, like, what are my thoughts on, this is a Star Wars question of all things. I told you we'd get geeky. What are my thoughts on Rogue One? Rogue One it's Rogue One, a Star Wars story. I think that's the full title there. This is the kind of the... honestly, it's sort of a prequel. I know people, try to steer clear of that word, but it is a prequel to A New Hope. In fact, there's the good chance that this Star Wars film is coming out in December. I'll say straight up, I am excited about this. It's coming out December this year, 2016. And it seems to be a direct prequel to A New Hope. Now, nobody knows the full plot line, so I cannot give you really any spoilers. So, if you want to say spoiler alert, fine, but I don't know what I could spoil for you. I've never seen it. Nobody's seen it. It is a movie about it's an Ocean's 11 in Star Wars. It's about stealing the Death Star plans, that end up getting used by Luke Skywalker, by the Rebel Alliance to destroy the Death Star at the end of A New Hope. I'm really excited for this. So as I already said, it's being directed by Gareth Edwards. There's a whole bunch of other people coming in on it. The trailer, we finally got to see some trailers of it. All that shit looks amazing. I love the fact that Forrest Whitaker is playing a character from the Clone Wars cartoon, because I love the Clone Wars cartoon. He's playing Saw Gerrera. I think that's really cool. Darth Vader, of course, is going to be in it. I think that's great. Everything I've seen from it looks really good. I was concerned. There was talk about how Gareth Edwards kind of was losing control of the film, and Disney, which owns Lucasfilm, was saying, you need to, something's wrong here, the tone's too dark. Like, this is kind of the theory going around. There's not a lot of clarity on what's happening. And you can barely believe anything coming out of, in my opinion, as I think I said this in the Star Trek, the movie rankings of Star Trek, episode that I did about 2 weeks back. It was a Patreon-only episode. But you cannot believe a single word that comes out of any production person's mouth for any movie. Ever since Star Trek Into Darkness, and when J.J. Abrams made it very clear that Benedict Cumberbatch's character in Into Darkness was not Khan Noonien Singh. When he said that it wasn't Noonien Singh, when he said it wasn't Khan, but it ended up in the movie, absolutely, yes, he was Khan. From that point forward, I said, you absolutely cannot believe a word that anybody, any director, any producer, any actor, that anybody says. Now, so the idea that there was a problem in tone with the film was a leak from some fans, and other people have been brought in, to do some post-editing, to do some editing work, and there were reshoots and all this stuff. Now, I was one of the guys, I think this got treated unfairly, because, a lot of commentators on Star Wars, like I mentioned earlier, that show Jedi Council, where they talk about all this. There's Rebel Force Radio too. They kept writing people off saying, look, reshoots happen. Stop freaking out about it. Reshoots happen with every movie, to where, months after principal photography, they will, they'll go in and recut some scenes and add in some stuff. And it's like, no, I was actually a little pissed off about that, because the problem wasn't that there are reshoots for Rogue One. The problem was that the rumor of it that it was too dark. When people were wanting from Rogue One, they were wanting a dark film. Because like Gareth Edwards said about the movie, the director, what he said, it's called Star Wars. This is going to be the war film. You're finally going to get that war, which, whatever. And so, I was wanting the dark movie. I want dark films. So this is a subject in itself that I'll touch on kind of quickly. I saw recently the Ratchet and Clank movie, which is based off of course, the PlayStation series of the same name, which I love that PlayStation series, very fun. The movie was, it was okay, but there's the argument, a lot of people were saying they wish that was darker. I mean, it's Ratchet and Clank, how dark can you get? But a lot of people are saying they wish that was darker. It's fine if it's not dark, but everybody seems to be calling for, me included, a lot of things. Like, we want Power Rangers to be darker, and we got that great fan film that, boy, was it dark. You remember Zach was like a drug dealer and all this. I mean, all that stuff's great. Now, people will say, look, you got to make this for kids. You can't just have everything be dark. I sort of disagree with that. Like, I think that Hollywood has this... There's this overall concept that I don't want to get into, but there's this concept that there's this war on boys in school. Overall, like, there's this war on children, really. It's not just boys. But I think there's a huge problem in that, when I was growing up, the show I watched the most was Star Trek: The Original Series. Star Trek: The Original Series was not made for children. It absolutely was not. Okay? Children, it was made so that, you had the studio heads that they sanitized everything for the family, sure, but it was not just made for children. I actually have a big problem with the idea of things being made just for children. I think one of the things that helps people, mature quicker is in that you don't treat them like kids. Like, there's, this gets into basic things where people say, please... Parents, and I appreciate parents that do this, they say, please don't talk to my child like they're a baby. Don't talk to them like, in an infantile manner. Okay. And, like, don't say Gucci, Gucci, goo, and all this stuff. Like, talk to them normally so that they develop kind of normally. Like, that's sort of the idea. And I can appreciate that kind of concept. I'm not telling you how to parent. I'm just saying that I can appreciate that idea. And so I appreciate the fact that, like, when I was a kid, a lot of the heroes, a lot of the shows, that were at least somewhat geared towards kids, had the heroes were in their 30s or in their 40s. There wasn't like this fetishization of being young. And so I think that's missing. When you try to gear everything towards children, when children are people too. Now, you don't need to have orgies or anything in this stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it's okay for kids' heroes to not be 12. It's okay for kids' heroes in entertainment to be in their 30s, to be in their 40s, or whatever. And I worry that there's this kind of like, there's this real push to get, and it's been around forever. It's been around, or at least for 20 years, I think I've noticed this, to where, it's even been around before that. Like Shazam was, Billy Batson, and he transformed into a man, but it was an attractive comic book because, well, the hero is really a kid who just got the heroes of, the powers of an adult and all this stuff. But that just showed, well, that's a whole other psychological subject. But yeah, so my concern overall was that, like, look, kids can handle some darker shit. That's okay. Don't sanitize all this stuff to make the most money, but that's really what it's all about, of course. At least for Disney anyway. So I worry about that. So like with Ratchet and Clank, being like, I got off subject, but like, that people wanting it to be a darker film, it could have been a little darker. That's okay. Kids can handle it if you let them. And it doesn't have to be traumatic either. It really doesn't. Anyway, so Rogue One, yeah, that was a concern, but so far everything's looking fine with the movie. I'm not gonna talk about it much longer here. Things are looking okay with Rogue One. Here's a statement that'll give me some shit. I think this might become actually a really, really important film. In that, I don't think A New Hope, Episode 4, which this movie will be a direct prequel to Episode 4. I don't think Episode 4 is a very good movie. I mean, it's Star Wars, so yeah, it's a cut above. It's already better than a lot of things. But in comparison to other Star Wars movies, I think A New Hope is probably the worst. It's just not, I don't think it holds up very well. I don't think Star Wars would have I don't think it would have its staying power if it weren't for Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. I just don't. Those are what made it so fucking epic. Those are what made it, wow, this is amazing. As to where A New Hope, yeah, nobody had ever seen anything like that. But if Empire and Return of the Jedi weren't so much fucking better, something else could have come along and unseated Star Wars as far as being, like the media franchise of the universe. Okay, I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying it's not great. It's not up to the same level that everything else in Star Wars really is. So there's the chance. I think that Rogue One could be very important because it could give so much backstory to what's happening in A New Hope, and it could give so much depth and even a lot of darkness to what's happening in A New Hope, that A New Hope could become a great film because of the setup that Rogue One gives it. And nobody's really talking about that. Like, I think when you're on, in the beginning of the movie, you're on the Tantive 4, you're on the Corellian Corvette, the Rebel Blockade Runner, whatever you want to call it. Okay, the Princess Leia's on. And when Vader comes in, you could be looking at Vader in a completely different light after seeing Rogue One. It could be, I mean, he's already super menacing. It's already a great moment when the stormtroopers come blasting through the door. But there could be so much more context to what's happening when he goes through that door. I think this could become, there is the potential that this could be the best Star Wars movie ever made, in my opinion. There is the potential. People don't share my appreciation for the prequels and all that, so you might want to toss what I'm saying out of hand. But the idea that this could make A New Hope a far better film, I think that's totally legit. I don't think you could disagree with me on that. But if you do, you do. So I'm looking forward to it. I love the fact that they admitted that Bail Organa, that Jimmy Smits, who played him in the prequels, Leia's dad, adopted dad, obviously, is going to be in it. I think that's awesome. I hope he has a large role in the film. It might just be a cameo, but I'll take a large role. I love seeing Mon Mothma in it. All of this stuff is, like, everything I've seen so far, I think is great. The U-Wing, that's that new Rebel ship, looks awesome. The movie looks like it has some humor in it. Seeing the Death Star more, especially, the other thing is, at any moment you get on the Death Star, if you've read the book by Claudia Gray, Lost Stars, which is the best Star Wars book out there right now, in my opinion, if you've read that, you see the Death Star in a totally different light after reading that, especially. So we're in for a real treat, I think, as Star Wars fans. I am excited about Rogue One. I cannot wait to see it. And I think, again, all the acting's great. Everything's just looking good. There's a chance that it could suck. I'm open to that, but whatever. Anyway, we have Rebels. So the cartoon right now, Star Wars Rebels, which is fucking awesome. Cannot wait for Thrawn to be in it. One of my favorite characters. So goddamn exciting. I am really, really looking forward to this season of Rebels. I'm glad we're going to be able to sink our teeth into that before Rogue One comes out. But that'll be good. And then, the following year, we've got Episode 8. And what I'm hearing from that, all of that sounds really, really enjoyable. Star Wars is in good shape right now, in my opinion. I like largely what's going on. The only area that I feel like there's some lack, there's been more great books than not, so that's better than during the expanded universe days, during the Legends days before Disney took over. There are the comic book series. This is the part where things have been a little lacking. It's been very touch and go with the comic books. I have not been. Some of them are good, some of them aren't. I'm glad they're ending the Darth Vader series because that's been touch and go. The best comic book series has definitely been Lando, and the present Han Solo run has been great. The Poe Dameron run was all right at first. I already think it's sort of waning. The Star Wars comics themselves, there are some real gems in that, in the main Star Wars title comics. Like the issue with the Stormtroopers, the issues with Obi-Wan Kenobi have been great. That's something, too, if you've listened to other Star Wars commentators, that I'm really looking forward to is a Obi-Wan Kenobi trilogy. Let's do this. And Ewan McGregor's on board. Let's make this happen. I am totally for those movies getting made. The Han Solo prequel is looking good, like I said. But yeah, that's the only area where I think things have been kind of lackluster as late, has been in the comic book series. But they're shaking things up there, and so hopefully that'll turn out all right. So anyway, enough. I've talked for way too long. I don't like these things really. I plan on Q&A episodes only being a half hour, maybe 40 minutes, but then they end up being 2 hours. Or in this case, an hour and a half, hour and 40. So there you go. Definitely happy with what's going on with Star Wars. I'm excited for Rogue One. I think all the pieces are in place. It's looking good. And overall, Disney has been doing an all right job, with what they've been doing with Star Wars. I'll leave you with the last bit. Star Trek. Speaking of Star Trek, let's bring that up fast. Star Trek Discovery. I am so excited for this. If you haven't heard the news, apparently the captain is not going to be the main character. I think it might even be a woman who I think they did say it was a woman who's going to be playing the lead. It is going to take place 10 years before Captain Kirk's, before the original series, before, Captain Kirk's time, his first stint. And it will take place in the Prime universe. I think we are in for a real treat. I cannot wait for this series to come out in January. Very, very exciting. And I love the idea that the captain's not center stage. I think that's really cool. Whenever I write Star Trek fan fiction, the captain is never the big cheese. The captain is never the center. Like, I always have it be the first officer or somebody else that is like the center point of the narrative. So cool. I think that's going to be great. So anyway, a lot of stuff to enjoy, as far as that goes. All right, that's enough. I'll have another episode probably coming out tomorrow. I'll do a top 8 I won't spoil the surprise for you, but I will be doing a top 8. Carpe Lucem, everybody. Again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to message me through Patreon or email me. Also, thank you so much for all those that are donating through Patreon. And a lot of you have been upping your donations, and we've been getting new donors, new patrons every single week. Thank you. Thank you. It means the world to me. All right, I'll see you on the other side. Woo! Away we go.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.